Hello everyone, I come from Expresswell Resources in Singapore. I am a coal trader, and today my topic is the international thermal coal supply and demand analysis and outlook. This is the breakdown of my contents. Firstly, global coal supply and demand trading pattern. Second, review of international thermal coal supply and demand post-COVID-19. Thirdly, international thermal coal supply and demand outlook. As to the first part, to global coal supply and demand trading pattern, I will touch upon the output, consumption, trade volume, and some key trading pathways in the world to interpret the first part. Secondly, about the post-COVID-19 review of international thermal coal supply and demand, I will touch upon the influence of the COVID-19 over the social patterns and the energy structure, the supply and demand, and the trade of coal. I will touch upon during the COVID-19, post-COVID-19, and the current status quo of supply and demand of coal. My third part about the international thermal coal supply and demand outlook during the energy transitional period, and I will touch upon two backgrounds. First, COVID-19, and after the prevention and control of COVID-19, how about the world economic recovery? Second, about the key features of the energy transition. So we will discuss the international thermal coal supply and demand against those two backdrops. Now let's directly cut the chase and go to the first part. Global coal supply and demand trading pattern. And there are 4 points I want to make. Firstly, about the global coal production. Second, about global coal consumption. Third, global coal trading flow. And fourth, keywords of the global coal pattern. To wrap up, the global coal supply and demand patterns. About the global coal production landscape, this diagram summarizes the recent 4 decades of global coal production. Before 2000, the global coal production was gradually rising up. Starting from 2000, in Asia-Pacific region, particularly led by China, the global coal production increased to 8.2 billion tons from 4.7 to 6 billion tons. And starting from 2014, there was a big transition, and there was a sharp decline in 3 years' time consecutively. So in 2014 till 2016, the production was going down from 8 billion tons to 7.5 billion tons. And by 2019, there was a rebound. Global coal production was 8.1 billion tons in 2019, and in 2020, due to the impact of the COVID-19, total production was 7.7 billion tons, a year-on-year decrease of 4.82%.
从全球煤炭的生产国家来看，2020年全球
By the producers. This is a table of the global top 10 producers: China, India, USA, Indonesia, Australia, Russia, South Africa, Germany, Kazakhstan, Poland. The total production of the 10 countries proportion increased to 92.3%. The actual production was about 1.7 billion tons in total. If we look at the coal production share of major countries, Asia-Pacific proportion has been elevated. In comparison, the USA and Europe have seen a decline of their proportion because of the exhausted coal mines. and other factors. As you can see, China takes up the largest proportion. In 2020, the production was about 3 billion tons, a year-on-year increase of 31.4%. So even against the COVID-19, China's coal production has been up and up. So in general, the coal supply is pivoted towards Asia Pacific region. And in 2020, the global coal production, due to the factor of COVID-19, broke the circle of an upward trend. So now let's look at the consumption landscape. This diagram is a global coal consumption landscape. The consumption volume has undergone 3 stages of changes. The first stage lasted from 1965 to 1989. There was consistent increase of consumption with an annual increase of 2.03%. The second phase was from 1990 to 1999. The global coal consumption was steady. And the third stage was from 2000 till 2013. Led by China, the global coal consumption rebounded and go up, and it increased by about 3.88% year-on-year. The fourth stage was from 2014 to 2020, and the consumption volume reached the peak and had some slight fluctuations. In 2020, due to the factor of the COVID-19, global coal consumption was about 15 billion, and that's a year-on-year increase of 4%. Now, let's look at the main top 2 coal consumers in the world. In 2020, the top 10 countries of coal consumption were China, India, USA, Japan, South Africa, Russia, South Korea, Indonesia, Germany, Vietnam. The total coal consumption in the 10 countries account for 77.8% in 2000, and in 2020, it accounts for 62.2%. This slide divides it up by the regions. Asia Pacific region coal consumption has a rising share year-on-year. By contrast, Europe, North America has seen a depleted resources and their energy restructuring. Their consumption share has been declining. In Central America, Southern America, and Africa, their coal consumption share was quite steady. So, to wrap it up, Asia Pacific coal consumption has a rising share in the world. And also by this diagram, China is still the biggest coal consumer. In 2020, the coal consumption was accounting for over half of coal consumption in total in the world. So now I have analyzed the production pattern and consumption pattern of coal globally. Next, let's move to the trade pattern. With this map, we can see the global trade flow. The orange dots represent the main importers, that is the consumers, and the blue dots represent the main producers and exporters of coal. With this map, it is obvious that the global coal export and import patterns are twofold in the Atlantic region and the Asia Pacific region, respectively. Indonesia, Australia, USA, Russia, South Africa, and Mongolia are the main exporters of coal. China, India, Japan, South Korea, ASEAN, and part of the EU countries are the main importers of coal. According to BP, We can see from this table that the exporters and importers are both concentrated in Asia Pacific region right now. Now let's break them down in more details. This diagram shows us the global coal exports of main exporters. By now, the top one coal exporter was Indonesia. In 2020, it exported 400 million tons of coal. As to Australia, it was 370 million, and the number 3 is Russia. In 2020, the coal export volume increased year by year because of China's strong demand. And in 2020, Russia's export of coal was 193 million tons, a year-on-year increase of 1.7%, while Australia and Indonesia had a decline of export. This is about global coal imports of main importers. China is definitely ranking number 1 in terms of imports. In 2020, China imported 304 million tons of coal, a year-on-year increase of 1.5%. India is number 2 importer in 2020. India import of coal amounted to 218 million tons, a year-year increase of 8.4%. So just now we've touched upon the production, consumption, and trade flows of coal globally. Now let's wrap up some keywords of global coal patterns. The first keyword, Asia Pacific region. Global coal trades are centralized in Asia Pacific region. The second keyword is China. China is by now the world's largest coal producer, consumer, and importer. The third keyword is thermal coal. I would love to mention that in the global coal trade volume, thermal coal has a higher proportion than coking coal. It accounts for 78% of total coal trades globally, while coking coal accounts for 22%. So that's about global coal patterns, and please allow me to review them quickly through with you. Global supply and demand, we've touched upon coal production, coal consumption, trade flow, and some keywords of the coal patterns. Next, let's go to the second part of my speech, the international thermal coal supply and demand post-COVID-19.
In
the post-pandemic era, particularly in 2020, the outbreak of COVID-19 was raging around the world, dealing a heavy blow to the global economy. The energy industry's supply chain and the industrial chain have been hit heavily, so global economy was in a recession in an unprecedented way. According to IMF report, it is forecasted that by the second half of 2021, the global economic recession will be about 3.3%. That's even more severe than the 2018 global financial crisis. At the meantime, the global coal demand is going down as well. Global trade volume was shrinking, supply overtakes demand, and in major regions, the prices of coal were shooting down, even lower than the minimum level in the last economic cycle. But with the prevention and control of COVID-19, China had an economic recovery, and coal consumption was quickly rebounding, leading the whole world to have a pickup of coal prices. By the end of 2020, the global coal market has basically seen a return to the pre-pandemic level. So in the second part, I will take you to review the thermal coal supply and demand in the post-pandemic era. And there are three parts. The first part is about the pandemic period. For example, the main feature was global coal production, consumption, and trades all posted a decline. The second phase was post-pandemic era, starting from Q4 of 2020, and global coal consumption, production, and trade volume recovered gradually. The third stage was since the second half of 2021. So this is where we are right now. Global energy product supply and demand were imbalanced. We have a very tight supply, boosting peak prices of global coal. So now let's firstly analyze the pandemic period in more details about the production, consumption, and trade volume. During the pandemic in 2020, the global coal output was 7.742 billion tons, a year-on-year decrease of 4.82%, while the global coal consumption declined 4.2% year-on-year, and it exhibited the biggest drop since the World War II. In 2020, globally speaking, among the 16 main producers of coal, coal output increased in 3 countries. All the remaining 13 producers have witnessed a decline in their output. And the biggest producer has always been China. In 2020, the production was 3.9 billion tons, a year-on-year increase of 1.4%. Number 2 was India, benefited from the rebound in Q4 2020. The total year-round production was 740 million tons, a year-on-year increase of 0.8% in India. Another producer that witnessed an increase was Vietnam. The output was 48 million tons compared to China. Vietnam was a small producer, but it was one of the very few producers to have seen an uprise of output during the pandemic, and its year-on-year increase was 5.1%. All the remaining 13 producers last year had witnessed a decline of output last year. So that's about the overview of the post-pandemic era. Now let's look at the consumption in the same periods. According to IEA, in 2020, the global trade volume decreased by 10%, a decrease of 150 million tons, the biggest drops in history. And as to seaborne trade, it takes up the largest proportion. And if we look at the main exporters in 2020, except Russia seeing an increase, all the others have seen a decline of exports, and the export declined in a big way. And the number one exporter used to be Indonesia, but in 2020, it experienced a decrease of 11.4%. Australia decreased by 6.4% year on year. If you look at the importers, the main importers and regions in 2020 have presented some division. The main importers and regions in the world, among them, Thailand, Pakistan, China, Turkey, in 2020 realized an increase of imports, but for the others, their coal imports declined in 2020.
讲述了我们刚刚讨论了在疫情期间的全球煤炭的生产量。
Just now we've touched upon the global coal consumption, production, and trades basically going down in the pandemic period. But as to the post-pandemic period, the global coal consumption, production, and trades gradually recovered. In Q4 of 2020, the global coal consumption rose by 3.5% year-on-year in Q4 of 2020, and global coal consumption recovered to pre-pandemic levels by the end of 2020, driven by rapid economic recovery and cold snaps in December.
说完消费量，我们再来看一下产量。2021
Now let's
年，
look at
由
production.
全球疫情的形势好转，主要煤炭生产国的产
In
量
2021, coal output from major coal producers registered yearly growth, together with improved pandemic situations worldwide in 2021, according to the available statistics. Mainly, they are about the first 3 quarters of 2021. From January till September, in Indonesia, its production was 457 million tons compared to last year. That's an increase of 8.7%. And during the same period in Russia and USA, their production of coal increased at different levels as well.
2021年伴随着中国煤炭需求量的快速提升，
With
印尼
China's demand rising up in 2021, the main exporters like Indonesia and Russia, they have seen larger export volume compared to last year.
我们看提升比较明显的主要是俄罗斯、美国，印尼有小幅的，
Especially
俄罗斯主要
Russia,
于
USA,
中国煤炭需求
and
的
Indonesia. Russia benefited from a rebound in China, and Australia export go down a little bit, mainly because now China has a sanction against Australian coal.
通过这幅图，我们可以看出
In this
2021
page, we can see that in 2021, the European import of coal increased by over 50% year on year.
除去亚太地区，由于
Except Asia Pacific region
疫情过后经济的
that benefited from a rapid recovery in the post-pandemic era,
依赖于天然气，
and also
欧洲地区也开始把他们的目光
because of natural gases, Europe has turning their sights to coal, so Europe has seen a rapid increase as well.
2021年9月份，我国
And in the first 3 quarters of this year, let's look at China. China import was 32.883 million tons, a year-on-year increase of 14.2 million tons and 76.1%. And compared to August, the monthly increase was 17.22%, and the imported thermal coal increased more big ways by about 138.6% year on year. Now let's look at China's import of thermal coal in the first 3 quarters of 2021. The cumulative import of thermal coal was 230 million tons, a year-on-year decrease of 370 million tons. The policies are not so stringent, so every month the import volume was quite flat and stable. So unlike before, usually in January and February, there was a very sharp increase. So year-round, we estimate that the year-round import will still be higher in total volume compared to the previous years. During the pandemic time, the global coal supply, demand, trade have shrunk, and now we finally have waited until the post-pandemic era. The coal production, consumption, and trade volumes have seen a recovery gradually, and the third phase is 2021. That's where we are right now. This is a historical moment, I guess. We have experienced the unprecedented energy danger right now. Now let's come to the third part of my speech about the supply-demand imbalance pushing global coal prices to new high in half two of 2021. Let's firstly look at the international coal price trends. You could see all the three indexes have hit the record.
我国作为最大的煤炭生产国
China is the biggest coal producer, consumer, and importer. So the domestic coal price has also hit the record for 5,500 K. The coal price FOB was over 2,000 RMB yuan.
所以说我们
That is to say, for this moment, in the second half of 2021, we are all hit by this energy crisis. And as to the reasons, let's analyze them. The first one is the global spread of COVID-19 pandemic. So that has led to a cliff-like decline in coal demand and a leaping rebound. It is difficult for the supply side to match such a drastic fluctuation in demand. The second reason is the extreme weather of La Nina that has caused to the cold winter and the raining winter, so there will be more restrictions of production in the coal exporting countries. And the third reason is the energy restructuring. Wind, solar, nuclear power, and all the new energies, even though are making progress, the capacity and installed capacity of new energy are still far short of our expectation. So usually we still are dependent upon traditional energy sources like coal, natural gas, and oil. As to other reasons, for example, the coal industry has been underinvested for many years, and it's difficult to pass this stress test brought by the epidemic and extremely difficult weather. And also, the natural gas prices skyrocketed as well. That stimulated short-term demand in parts of Europe to turn more towards coal. So natural gas price is also pegged to the prices of coal. Such a correlation has led to a skyrocketing rise of coal as well. So that's about the second half of 2021, and I analyzed the main reasons for the historical high price of global coal. Next, let's go to the third part. The international thermal coal supply and demand prospect during the energy transition period. After the sharp fluctuations of the coal market, we are going to recover to the normal levels. Now, as we have seen, climate change has become a common threat to all of us. In the post-pandemic era, low carbon and green development will be the mainstream, and Chinese government committed that by 2030, we aim to have a carbon peak, and by 2060, we will realize the goal of carbon neutrality. But the global period of carbon peaking may be beyond 2030. So that means the global coal consumption in the next 1 decade will still have some slight rise, and some main miners, in order to reduce their pressure of operation, propose that they will produce more thermal coal and invest more in thermal coal. For example, BHP and some other transnational companies have been handling the assets of thermal coal. And according to the financial institutions, they said that they will stop their financial support of the traditional thermal coal industry. So during the energy transitioning period, we are challenged heavily. And I would love to go into 3 topics. In the energy transitioning period, we will analyze what will be the supply and demand situation of thermal coal. First of all, global coal supply and demand forecast. Let's see what is our position right now in terms of coal demand. Secondly, the center movement of global coal trade shifts eastward. And third, let's analyze the global coal demand. I believe the global coal demand will slightly increase. So in the energy transitioning period, there will be some forecasts for us to refer to. Now, firstly, about the global coal supply and demand forecast. Since 2020, in Asia-Pacific region, the coal supply and demand volume in general went up, but the ratio of demand increase is larger than that of supply. We believe that this trend has started from 2014 with more coal burning installed capacity. This consumption will continue to rise up very rapidly in APEC region, even though supply increases as well, but it's not as much as that of consumption. So in APEC region, our demand of imported coal will be only higher. By contrast, the European market is different. Since 2012, the supply and demand have been on a decline as well, and supply decreased by 5.5% and demand decreased by 5.08%. So for import coal, the price is going down year by year. So in European and American countries, the price is already going down. And in APEC region, we are still going to have strong demand, and there will be potential of further increase of demand. China, Japan, South Korea, and some East Asian countries, consumption of coal will in general maintain the current scale. Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Malaysia, and India, Pakistan, Bangladesh will have a rising consumption of coal. In Indonesia, after some relentlessness during the pandemic era, they have speed up the process of establishing the power plants. So with the world economic recovery, the demand for energy, especially coal, will have a rebound as well. And the most significant place for that rebound will be in APEC region. For all the other consumers of coal in import and export, they have seen some elevation. Import demand is higher than that of export, so there will still be a gap between supply and demand. The international coal supply and demand will see a tight balance. Secondly, about the shifting of global coal trade centers. In 2000, that's about 20 years ago, US and Europe consumption of coal account for basically 1/3 of the total consumption globally. And basically in parallel with the total consumption of China and India in the past 20 years, we have seen a different trend of consumption. It's moving more eastward from Europe and USA to Asia Pacific region. And in 2000, China and India consumption of coal accounted for 29% and 26% respectively of the world. And later on, it increased to 56% and 11% respectively right now. So in total, they account for 2/3 of the total consumption globally, while US and Europe consumption in 2000 took up 23% and 12% respectively, and they declined to 6% and 4% respectively in 2020. So in total, those two regions account for only 10% of the global total coal consumption. Now, as to Asia, their consumption is rapidly growing from 1% in 2000, and in 2020 it was 5%. So it has exceeded EU and will about to exceed US. So Asia and India and ASEAN added all together will become the consumption centers of global coal. So why Asia Pacific region is the global trade center? We can look at the trade flow of one country as an example, Russia. Let's see the Russian coal exports outflow. We can see that it's already moving to Asia. And in the past years, Russia has consistently lean more towards West Europe and the Oriental countries. And especially gradually since the center of global coal trade is moving eastward and Asia has a rising demand for coal, Russian coal is flowing more eastward. In 2020, through the ports in eastern Russia, their exports was 107 million tons, accounting for 55.4% of its total exports. According to Russian government, it will speed up the establishment of the logistics facilities like ports so as to explore into the Asia-Pacific market and move their centers of exports to the east part of the world. On this page, we can see the global coal-fired power generation. Since 2015, the global coal-fired power generation cumulatively were contributed by China, India, Vietnam, Indonesia, and other countries listed here in the bar charts, respectively. And the top 10 countries have a cumulative coal-fired generation of 73% of the total generated coal. And China accounted for 21%. And since 2015, if we look at the year-on-year increase, Vietnam and other Asian countries like Turkey, Indonesia, Iran, and Africa and Kazakhstan, their increase ratio was even larger than that of China in terms of the total coal-fired generation volume. So while China is the biggest performer in coal-fired generation, the other ASEAN countries and African countries are enjoying a fast growth speed as a latecomer.
目前来看呢，全球72%的
72% of the global coal-fired power installed capacity and 95% of the under construction installed capacity are residing in Asia-Pacific region, and economic recovery will further spur the high growth ratio of the coal-fired power generation. By the end of 2020, for coal-fired installed capacity, globally it was
全球在建的煤电装机容量为179.9吉瓦，其中
179.9 gigawatts in Asia-Pacific region. It accounts for 95.3% of the total gigawatts. And for top 10 countries of installed capacity, 8 countries reside in Asia. They are China, India, Indonesia, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Pakistan. As to the installed capacity under construction, it is 165 gigawatts, accounting for 90% of the total installed capacity in the world under construction right now. So basically, we have seen a rapid growth of coal-fired power plants, and its continuous trend will further spur the consumption in Asia-Pacific region. If we look into the future, international community will continue to invest heavily in renewable energy, but as to coal, the investment is still going up.
So as
to the outlook of global coal market, we have 3 forecasts. The first one is the low carbon development is a major trend for energy sector. Secondly, in the post-pandemic era, with the global economic recovery, coal demand will also enjoy a rebound. Thirdly, coal consumption in Asia and Africa will have growth potential. So that's what I want to share about the global coal demand and supply and its forecast. Coal is the basic fossil fuel for all of us. In the industry and people's livelihood, it is playing an indispensable role, and it takes up a large proportion right now. But with social development and due to people's attention to climate change and new energy development and researches going on and progressing, coal is destined to exit from the history. But how to properly handle the transition from the traditional energies to the new energies, we have to consider how to balance the economic development and the soft landing of energy transition. That's a common task for all of us. So that's all for my sharing. Thank you for listening.